So please give it up for
Andrea Muntianu and Pedro Cruz.
Can the applause be louder? Thank you.
We missed the slide.
Hello.
Hello. There they are. So, I'm Andrea Montano. You spelled my name correctly, which is quite nice, I'll have to say. I'm the AML product manager at Canonical, and together with me I have Tux from Linux today. Oh well, no, it's Pedro, my colleague.
Thanks, Andrea. So my name is Pedro Cruz. I am the engineering manager for the office of the CTO at Canonical, the company that publishes Ubuntu. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for this reception. It's been such a lovely conference, and everyone at Lagos is so friendly. I feel so welcome here. And a special thank you for all the Ubuntu community here. Who here uses Ubuntu or knows about Ubuntu? There you go, a bunch of people. And I'm sure there are a bunch more who uses Ubuntu as a base image for their containers and so on. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about what we do at Canonical besides Ubuntu, the things that have kind of the same inspiration but are about other parts of the technology spectrum. So first of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about how Linux was 20 years ago, and there's an asterisk there because it's a very personal, subjective experience. I totally do not mean to offend anyone that was developing Linux 25 years ago, but that's kind of when my story with Linux started. But I felt very overwhelmed with Linux. It was a bit hard to get started. I couldn't find instructions, and running commands seemed to be such a alien thing. It was a bit uninviting for those of you who really like design and like beautiful GUIs. Maybe Linux in 2002, 2003 was not exactly your thing. And mainly here, what I'm going to focus on the next slide is it was really hard to get a copy. Linux was the most popular open source project out there 20 years ago. And the most popular open source project out there. And we're talking about open, I'm not limiting this to operating systems or anything. I'm talking about open source as in all the open source projects. And it was only accessible to 1.5% of the world population. And by default, Linux was alienating 98.5% of the world population. And that's simply because people did not really have broadband. So it's really hard to try different flavors, to try different versions. You'd have to find a friend that had a CDs, or buying a magazine, I don't know, or go to a university and just use their internet. That's how I used to do. And folks at Canonical recognized that that was a problem, that the issue here, the blocker between open source and people was internet connection. And I'm not saying that, you know, the Linux Foundation should have given broadband modems to everyone out there so they could download Linux. That's not what I'm saying. But you could do something simpler, like sending through mail. And that's how my story of open source started. When I was this boy that I did not have any money to pay for software, did not have money to start a business or to give to Canonical. But I got this package, shipped it all the way from Netherlands to the south of Brazil, where I'm from. And it contained all this amazing open source. And it really opened my eyes. Well, maybe I should be working, enabling more people to have the same experience. So in this talk today, we're going to identify a little bit what are the other blockers out there that are preventing people from realistically using open source.
Well, I'll move fast forward 20 years later. When open source, it's still hard. It's still hard to keep up to date, especially in the ML world, because every day you have a new tool popping up, a new project appearing, and it's very likely that you would like to know about it. It is hard to know all the things that are happening, all the tools that you can use, all the algorithms that you could be working on. But I think open source still enables users, data scientists, machine learning engineers to give it a shot. What about these days open source, Pedro? Can you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, so there you go. So we're going to focus a little bit about two aspects of open source that are very, very important for us at Canonical. And here I'm talking a lot about Canonical, but let me take my very orange hat off and say that if you do not like our projects, just think about this through the perspective of your own projects, the things that you like. Just try to find ways to make them more accessible to other people. So here I'm focusing on I really wish open source nowadays was really frictionless. So it was really easy to access it. It was really easy to get started with it. And the second thing is about operations. Because open source, especially cloud native, things that run in distributed systems in very complicated clusters and whatnot, these things, they are almost living beasts. They need some care. So we sometimes forget about day two operations. So those are the two things that we're going to talk about today.
Well, I'll have to be honest with you. This is a screenshot that we have from Kubeflow, one of the projects that I've been using. And it clearly encourages you to be an advanced user to try it out. But the truth is that there are very few of advanced data scientist users. So what about open source and frictionless and easy operations?
Yeah. So, well, getting infrastructure is out there and it's amazing. You can find public clouds, you can find OpenStack if that's your thing. Kubernetes is a powerhouse of orchestration. These things are amazing. The issue is that in reality, as you may know very well, that this is a bit more complicated than just this logo here. When you start digging into the architecture of these things and trying to think about how to run this in the most optimal way, you realize that the amount of things you need to know is huge. It's really overwhelming sometimes. And it's very similar, that's why I'm bringing this story again, it's very similar to how Linux was 20 years ago. So, yeah, of course, and on top of that, you have the paid trial, or the trials where you need a credit card, you need to learn new languages, you need to care about licensing. And there's so many things to keep in your head, even before you start developing your algorithm, training your models, or doing the things with your workloads. I'm just talking about infrastructure here. So here I want to propose on the next one. See one more? Yeah.
But even like that, with all these great advances about frictionless infrastructure, when it comes to machine learning, 75% of the answers from market researchers are not really satisfied about it. So what do we do? How can we make it better, basically? That's my question for you. And I keep challenging you the entire talk.
Yeah, folks. So the idea is here that maybe when you get started, you're not working in a huge company that has a huge budget for your infrastructure. You just have your laptop. How do you test out this beautiful machine learning tools only on your laptop? Well, you just install it. It's as simple as that. It doesn't matter what operating system you have. I would prefer if you had Ubuntu, but you can have whatever kind of laptop and you just install these applications. The issue is, of course, that once you do that, for each of these applications, you're going to have dependency hell. And you're going to have conflicting dependencies, and you're going to have different versions of these dependencies. It's going to be very, very complicated if you do not have a way to sandbox this test environment. So my suggestion here, and that's a very personal suggestion, that's what I do on a day-to-day basis, is use Multipass. So Multipass allows you to provision really quickly some VMs for Ubuntu. It's literally one command to install it. It doesn't matter what operating system you have. And then it's literally Multipass launch, and then it creates a VM for you. You do whatever you need to do. It's just an Ubuntu VM, and then you delete it. There's a dashboard for it if you read into GUIs and so on. But generally, Multipass is a very good option. If you want to explore a little bit what happens the distributed system world, that means when you have more than one computing node, when you have computers working together to deliver a certain resource, combined resource, you can try microcloud. If you have some Raspberry Pis or some old laptops, you can just install microcloud on each of these systems, put these computers in the same network, and suddenly you have your own private microcloud, and where you can run all your workloads. And it's really easy. You don't need any fancy equipment, don't need any fancy course or subscription module. No, just go there, download the thing. If it doesn't work, go complain in our forums. And if you want to learn more about distributed systems, if you want to learn about Kubernetes, you have this option. You have micro-K8s. So micro-K8s is the same philosophy, just one thing that you install in your laptop, and boom, you have your Kubernetes cluster ready for deploying your workloads. And yeah, you can use Kubeflow and make Andrea happy, and that's what micro-K8s is for.
Yes, I'll be happy here, because it's a suite of tools that it enables you to run AI at scale. But I have a question for you. You talked a lot about developer-friendly solutions. What about the big dreams? What about those in this room who would like to have their own business out of machine learning projects that they've been playing with since they were students or when they were trying to find a new job, because our previous talk was about that.
Yeah.
How do you find or solve problems that you deeply care about?
Yeah, exactly. So for those who are going to run these in production environments, or are going to offer a service based on this, have a workload that's going to be offered as a service, you need to think about something that this workload, once you deploy, you cannot forget about it. You cannot just leave it there and forget about it. You need to monitor, you need to observe it, you need to make sure that it's working properly. And that's from the user perspective. And there's also from the upstream perspective. If you're an upstream developer and someone who maintains a project, it's not open source if you just write the code, put it on GitHub with just a page of documentation and never look at that again. Well, it's not, that's my subjective interpretation of open source, at least. It's not something that you just dump there for corporate PR reasons. That's not open source. It's just cheating the system. You need to think about what happens on the second day after someone installs that, after someone deploys their workload in their machines, on their clusters. How are they going to maintain that alive and well? So yes, this sentence summarizes very well. So the application code is out there, is open source, everyone can have access to it. But the operational knowledge, that is the thing that comes next to the deployment, is not so popular. You see the projects out there, they have all the artifacts that you can install in different systems, different builds, different architectures. But what about instructions on how to run those things in the most optimal way? Of course, like, you can go to the Kubernetes documentation page, but it takes 1.5 years if you read 8 hours a day to read through the whole thing. There's some sort of automation that needs to be put in place for people to realistically take cloud native workloads and infrastructure and use that in production. So think on the next one. We have our solution for that, or our project, which is also, every time I say solution or product, I'm afraid that you guys are going to understand as a non-open source thing. Everything that I'm presenting here is 100% open source, and you're welcome to take a look at the source code. But as I was saying, that's Juju. And fear not, it's only magic for your microservices, and it allows you to, it creates this virtual layer of abstraction between your infrastructure and your microservices. So it's not like it's not creating an actual virtualization layer, but it's just represented as a line there, so you understand that it works regardless of where your infrastructure is and regardless of what your workload is. And it works on Kubernetes and VMs or directly on Metal. We don't care about what vendor you're using. You can use any of these vendors. There are 30-something more that we support. Doesn't need to be canonical provided. Can be anything that you have in your system already.
So if we have to summarize it, when it comes to machine learning, or also to open source, the first rule is to try it out. Try the things that you're interested or you find easy to use or you think could solve your problems or your challenges that you have. And in case you stumble into problems, and you will, ask for help. Go on Slack, Discourse, GitHub, and ask for your problems. Raise the issues that you have. And the beauty of open source is that there is always someone who could help you. And there is very likely that there is someone who ran into the same problem at some point in time.
Yeah, and here's a message to those who maintain open source projects, those who are the upstream. I'm not talking so much about the users here. Think about the operational knowledge, how you share that. Good documentation is great, but how do you automate day two? How do you make sure that your users are running your workloads in the most optimal way? Of course, that I can run on the workloads and just follow the documentation, but how do you assure that it's the most optimal way, right? Without having to hire a specialist per deployment. So think about that. How do you share that? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
And whereas the machine learning world is changing quickly, you can always find tools like Juju to make the deployments easy and to enjoy it without being an advanced user, as you're advised to.
Yeah,
and if we move further, you can ask your questions. That's where we are. And it's me, Pedro. You also have Sergio here, and a bunch of other canonical folks that you can ask us.
Yeah, folks, we work in the open. Our engineers are monitoring these forums all the time. They're asking questions between themselves. And there's no silly question. There's no complicated question. Just please come and talk to us. It's a pleasure. And thank you very much. Also, take a look at our careers website. We are hiring for a bunch of roles in different areas. Just take a look there. If you find something that you like, don't hesitate to apply. Thank you.